Drawing your firearm is not a warning. It's not intimidation. It's a decision that can save your life or destroy it legally. In South Africa right now, far too many gun owners misunderstand when they are actually justified. Today, we break down this exact threshold, mindset, the law, the psychological moment you cannot afford to get wrong. We are joined once again by the lead instructor of the Lone Operator Training Program, Shalto Schoeman. Shalto, good afternoon. Welcome back to the channel.
Good afternoon, Riaan. Thanks for having me back again.
Okay, let's just jump straight into this. Let's talk about that split second when the brown stuff hits the whirly thingy and that uncertainty turns into real danger. What specifically must be happening, both internally and externally, before a responsible armed citizen crosses the line from being situationally aware to actually drawing your firearm?
Yeah, that's a good question, Riaan. You know, I'm not a legal expert, but if we go through to the Firearm Act and the law for a normal citizen carrying a firearm, you know, the normal rule of thumb, or not rule of thumb, but the rules that we have to abide by is if my life should be in danger. So if I am standing next to somebody, he draws a gun and my life is in danger, so death, okay, grievous bodily harm, you know, so they block all the exits, and this guy is locking the door and he says, you know, I am going to kill you, or I, you know, hartslaan, that type of thing, you know, then it's grievous bodily harm, you know, for instance, a husband hitting a wife, you know, and he's not stopping, you know, and other person can then intervene, you know, stuff like that. And then the last one is, or a violent felony in progress. Like in South Africa, there's a lot. Cash and transits would be one. ATM bombings would be one. You know, hijacking would be one where there's violence involved and they're hitting the person, you know, and they're threatening him with a firearm. That's where you can intervene, and felonies and stuff like that. So those
it's not,
three.
It's not about I'm angry now, I'm drawing my firearm. It's about facing imminent and unlawful and life-threatening violence.
Yeah, and South Africa is a hotspot for that. You know? So
yes. And of course,
everywhere we go, there is something like that happening. You know, I had an interview, or not an interview. Every time we do a anti-hijacking course, there's always 10 or 15 people attending that course, and then out of that 10 or 15 people, there's always 8 or 9 people telling me horrific stories about hijackings, you know, and people following them, or criminals following them into their home and being attacked and threatened with knives and guns, you know. So, yeah. But coming back to the points, those are the three, you know, if my life is in danger, grievous bodily harm, and then if a felony is committed in front of you, you can then basically intervene.
You must be, when you draw that firearm, because it's a deadly tool, you must be mentally prepared to actually use it, right? You're not just drawing it to flash it around.
Yeah, you know, and the other interviews that you have done, that's a very important part. You know, I don't think people sit down and actually think about the weapon that I'm choosing. Could be anything. It could be, you know, impact weapon. It can be a knife. It can be a firearm. But I don't think people tend to think about the weapon that I'm carrying if I would actually use it. You know.
So let's just look at a legal perspective. And, you know, as you've said, and I want to just reconfirm that This isn't a legal talk. I will be discussing this still with Francois de Kock in the series Legal Talk with Francois. That's one of the episodes that we are planning to do still about this very thing. And then we'll obviously be focusing totally on the legal side of this. But for the sake of this episode, I just want to touch on the legal perspective. What are the criteria that need to be present for a defensive action to be lawful? And where do you see ordinary firearm owners most dangerously misinterpret these requirements?
Yeah, you see and it clearly states that in your basic unit standard when you do the law part of it, that the threat is imminent. That means happening now, not later. It's happening now. The guy is attacking you now. He's closing that door and he's locking it and he's giving you threats and saying, I'm going to kill you. That is happening now. He's drawing a firearm and he's pointing at you now, right now. So it's imminent. It's happening now. So that's a crucial part of when I can draw a firearm. The other one is if there's no other safe alternative. Okay, so let's take for instance, there's a mob in the street, and they corner me. Let's say in the corner of a garage, and I have no alternative to escape. Then that is basically drawing your firearm. I think there was one case that was all over social media and over the news and stuff where a security guard was racking his shotgun and the mob totally went over him and took away his shotgun and then beat him to a pulp. So that's a perfect example of when I can draw a firearm, because that mob hasn't got the best intentions. They actually going to kill you. And so now I can draw my firearm.
So this is, am I correct when I say that this is stipulated, by law, really? The requirements that an attack must adhere to, like it must be unlawful. Correct me if I'm wrong here. It must be imminent or underway already. It must be directed at you or another innocent person. There must be a proportional response, and there must be no reasonable alternative.
I'm glad you mentioned that one. Your proportional response. So like we said in the previous interviews, a lot of people tend to go in. If you take a normal street fight, where a guy knocks you out and then you fell on the ground and now he's kicking you and stuff, that is not proportional. You're going to have to stop. The necessary violence needs to apply. So but in a nutshell, that is basically it. That's your guidelines.
Do you think that well, I don't think I know, these requirements are very often misunderstood by even seasoned firearm owners. Because we still get these questions like all the time. So it's very evident that people have a hunger for this knowledge, because they feel that they need to be more knowledgeable on this. And I'm all for that, because I feel being a responsible firearm owner is partly training and being able to shoot well with that pistol and safety, etc. But you also need to be knowledgeable with legal requirements and safety requirements and so on. So, but I mean, the example that I'm thinking of, you either drawing too early or you're waiting too long because uncertainty. And that can be, it can be fatal both ways, don't you think?
Drawing too early or drawing too late. Yes, I don't know if I should mention that, but I've actually seen a guy draw too early. I'm not going to mention names, but we were on our way to a restaurant, and the one guy had an argument. You could see it was road rage, and the guys got out of the vehicle, and as they got out of the vehicle, I just saw the one guy draw his firearm, and oh,
Phew.
the whole thing just escalated from there, and
Wow.
we couldn't move because the cars were blocking the road.
Yes.
So, I had a front row seat to what was going to happen. I actually thought this guy was gonna fire in, fire his weapon.
Mm.
And luckily, what happened, well, he pointed the firearm and then he put back the firearm in the holster. So that's basically drawing too soon. His life is not in danger. That's basically just getting into an argument and saying, "Hey, I will shoot you." That's also foolish. You know,
That's
that's that's basically stupid.
yes.
Not doing that. I would recommend to anybody listening, and we also recommend to all our students that the firearm only comes out of the holster once it's absolutely necessary, and that's the last resort. So it just opens up a whole can of
Yeah.
worms when you do
I
that.
like the last resort part. Okay.
Yeah. But
When
the
you
the alternative is also true, where
yeah.
the guy, and it happens around, if I take myself and you, and I take a normal citizen, he's got a wife and a family and kids and stuff, and now you sort of in a confrontation, and this thing is basically escalating, and now all of a sudden, now you're going into the thought process of what's actually going to happen once I draw this firearm, and that's drawing too late. But the consequences of shooting somebody, there's always consequences. The aftermath is huge. It's not just shooting somebody and I go home. There's
so
psychological effects on that and stuff. So yeah.
let's talk about that specifically, but at the part at the start, when you realize, okay, this is no longer just a normal confrontation, this is now a lethal threat. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens inside your body and inside your brain, and how does the physiological response influence let me say that again, the physiological response, how does it influence decision making in those absolutely critical seconds?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. Every person is sort of different. Some guys have a natural fight in them that they want to fight back. Some guys freeze. I was a Krav Maga instructor for a long time, and a lot of guys were held at gunpoint, and mostly women. And I'm not being sexist or something like that, but most of the cases were women just freezing. And once you interview them, they said, well, they saw everything is in slow motion, but they could have done nothing. Their body was basically paralyzed. Then you get the other guy that just wants to fight everybody, and it doesn't have any recourse of what the consequences can be. But the normal guy, I would say, those are the two poles, and somewhere in the middle, what we've now seen and interviewed, somewhere in the middle is basically your heart, or your body is basically dumping adrenaline into the body. It's shoving blood into the major organs. You get tunnel vision. Your fine motor skills go out of the window. And yeah, you're ready either to fight or to run, but yeah, that sort of thing. Your heart beats out of your chest. And that's sort of normal. Now, in training, a lot of guys say, okay, but when do I get to that point where my training kicks in and that heart pumping and adrenaline goes away? It's never going to go away. That's your body basically preparing you for combat. So that's not going to go away. It's you're going to have to fight through that. And it's the first 30 seconds, I believe, that
So,
are the most important.
Are you saying that the only way that you can bridge that gap in that couple of moments of chaos happening in your body and in your brain, the only moment that the only way that you can bridge that gap is with continued, preferably, and high quality training where you are put in these pressure scenarios. So your body and your mind learns to deal with it easier. And if you ever do end up in a situation, that's not the first time you have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, the other alternative is going into Iraq and then fight there.
Sure.
Then you can also get accustomed to that. I would tend to prefer the second prize where I can get good training and do it in a safe environment, and then slowly but surely make your body respond to that. Then,
I'll take
going
that.
into that.
Definitely. I'm with you on that. So let's say you're in a defensive shooting. Hopefully you never are, but let's say you are, and it's a perfectly justified defensive shooting. Talk to me about the implications and consequences, because you're looking at potential legal consequences. You're looking at emotional consequences. You're looking at financial potentially consequences.
Very much so.
And a lot of people rarely, if ever, think about that. Have you yourself seen these realities actually affect and maybe even reshape somebody's life after the fact?
Yes, Rian, I have. This was still is a good friend of mine. I'm not going to mention names, but a very good friend of mine. We went to primary school together and high school together, and my brother-in-law is actually, his brother. So we very close knit. But let me tell the story, and then it was a Friday, and they were basically paying salaries and or wages, and these guys came into the house, and my friend at that point was getting ready for work, and he just saw a ruckus, and they were basically shooting his dog, and then pointing the firearm at his mother, and he ran out of the house and he was shooting. The story complicates even more because now they turned their backs on him, which lawfully says that the attack is now stopped. But now they turn their backs on him. While they're running, they're shooting.
Okay.
So now my friend had to engage them, because now they're running away. The attack has stopped, but they're still engaging, which means the attack is still happening. It's still imminent, So he had to shoot one guy. The one guy fell down and he actually lost his life. It clubbed a major artery.
Okay.
And he lost his life. Okay. But now the aftermath is they're going to take your firearm. My friend, they took his firearm. They did ballistic tests. Luckily, there was seasoned police on the scene, and they didn't arrest him. They saw all the bullet holes and what was happening to the dog at that stage and to the mother. And he had no weapon to defend himself for a long time. I think it was a year that he got his gun back. Legally, there was some legal cases, and he didn't prepare for that. Luckily, he could get through it. But the normal guy in the streets, I don't think thinks about that. You're gonna, for instance sake, I think 500,000 is not going to get you far if you're in the wrong, or that case is going to go on for a long time. You're going to go into court for a long battle. I think 500,000 is not going to go very far unless you've got insurance.
That's the problem. And again, and I mean, lots of people say criminals have free reign, and I on this I actually agree. They don't think about consequences. You know,
No.
it's matter. You and I, as lawful, law-abiding citizens, we have to think about consequences, because there can always be, and even if there's no, you know, even if it's a fully justified shooting and the state decides that, you know, it ends there, it's justified, it's fine. There's always on scene, there's a possibility of arrest in any case. Okay, you never know.
Look, if you're gonna get a policeman that is unsure, then you're most probably gonna get arrested. You're gonna go to the cells. You're not gonna go to jail. There's a difference. A lot of people say, I'm going to jail. It's not the case. You're going to the cells, the police cells, and then if it happens over the weekend, you're going to stay in the cells over the weekend, and you're going to get to court on the Monday, and they're going to hear your case, and then they're going to apply bail if you're not a flight risk, and if it's reasonably believed that this was a self-defense scenario, you'll get bail, you know. So, and then your fight is starting. But, you know, like we always say to the loan operator students, you know, there's a course, a path that if something like this does happen, always phone the ambulance. Why phone the ambulance? Because that shows that you have sort of remorse of what you're doing, and that you want to get that guy the medical aid that he needs.
Medical assistance.
Okay? The second thing that you need to do is, obviously we need to phone the police, because we're law-abiding citizens. You know, shooting has happened. Somebody is severely injured, and these guys need to come to the scene. The third thing, and a lot of people tend to forget this, is get yourself a lawyer. Open up a document, and be a customer or a client of this lawyer. Because stuff like this doesn't happen, you know, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon where everybody is still available. It's normally happening at 12 o'clock at night, you know, when everybody's sleeping. And then when the lawyer needs to be there, and you're not a customer of him or client of him, he's going to sort it out tomorrow. You know, I've seen it happen a lot of times.
No, that's
the fourth and final thing
that
you need to do is take photos of the scene, because you get guys contaminating that scene. You know, stupid example would be, you know, your wife comes to you and she kicks a casing away, but you've just shot her. She kicks that casing away. Now the investigation is happening. The detectives are on the scene and they can't get the casing. Now the whole thing happens, and it's 2 years from now, and now you don't know where the casing was, and it sort of goes out of your mind. So take photos of that whole crime scene before it gets contaminated, so that your lawyer is basically going to love you for that.
And most definitely do not tamper with the scene.
Yes.
That is gonna cause you serious problems.
I tend to tell the students, you know, because I get this question, you know, should I not shoot the guy and put a knife in his hand? No, please don't do that. Yes. No, please don't do that.
No, you will.
There are very good cops out there, you know, and forensic cops out there, and they are going to catch you. Please don't do that. They're more clever than that.
They can tell. No, I mean, that's a surefire way of ending up in very serious the trouble.
Correct.
The other things that I just want to touch on, I don't want to end up spending too much time on this one, but there is an emotional toll. There is a potential media backlash, but the media can run with the story, and you can get your face in the media where, you know, it's probably not something that you ideally want to do, because, you know, it can have an impact on your family. There can be PTSD problems. Trauma is a bit of a bastard. It can come back when you least expect it. So there's a lot of things that you have to keep in mind when it comes to something like this.
You know,
And
that's a very good thing you just mentioned there. You know, if you just look at Oscar Pistorius, the emotional strain that that guy, yes, sure, he was guilty, but did you check that emotional strain that he went through? You know,
yes,
so it's not games. You know, and
no,
but
no, that's serious.
I'm sure the audience has their preference and who's right and who's wrong. I'm not saying that. You know, what I'm saying is put yourself in Oscar's shoes. You've shot a guy. Now you're going to jail. You're most probably going to sit there for 10 years if you're in the wrong. Emotional strain is definitely part of that.
Yeah, even if the case ends up in court, as it
Yeah.
is, I think there's enough emotional stress involved if you had to defend yourself and somebody got fatally injured in the process. Just that adds enough emotional stress, unless you're a robot, obviously. But
Yeah.
by and large, I think with pretty much most people, you will probably have a few sleepless nights about it because nobody really wants to go there. You carry a gun, but you absolutely hope that you never have to go there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's there, and I feel it's
I
just
think
not.
the normal law-abiding citizen, has that thought in his mind.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I tend to believe
So,
that.
in your long experience of training civilians, what do you think tends to be the greater danger? Hesitation rooted in fear of legal consequences, or premature action rooted in ego or maybe panic? And what do you think separates disciplined decisiveness from reckless escalation?
Look, yeah, the latter is the one that I tend to believe. When we interview most of our students, it's the fear of the legality, it's the fear of losing the income. Now I'm going to prison, and now I look like that director that had a affair.
Oh, at the concert.
He basically got her, he got to the office on Monday, and there's your letter, saying
Yes.
you unemployed. So it's that sort of stuff. So there's an emotional side to this thing. There's a legal side to this thing. The costs of that legal battle, and then there's definitely an emotional side to this. There's consequences. Now, who's going to feed for my wife and my kids and stuff? So, yes, the late draw or drawing late or waiting for the attack to escalate a little bit more is definitely the consequences of, or the one that's in favor of the law-abiding gun
Un
owner.
uncertainties. And I think
And then,
a lack of
yeah,
knowledge.
yeah, it's that too, because
Mm.
the law is not clear cut, Rian. You can understand the law, yes, great, but on the day, it's still the law that's going to decide. It's that judge, it's that lawyer
Always.
defending you. Sort of that sort of stuff can also. There's still a human factor in this whole thing. It's just my opinion, but I think there's still a human factor into this. It's not clear cut.
What about overconfidence?
Yeah,
You know, just brandishing your gun to try and scare someone. I actually think those days are pretty much over. I don't think today's criminals get too scared if you show them you've got a gun. By and large, they've probably got more guns.
look, I was at the police station. When was this ago? It's about 6 months ago. I was handing in a new application for a firearm as usual. The wife is she's getting cross, but I'm at the police station in any case. So I'm just standing and looking at this whole scene, and there was a domestic violence situation, and the husband took out his firearm and he pointed it at the wife. So the next day, the wife came to the station, but it was a major ruckus because the husband also came to the station,
mm,
and there was, they sort of tended to want to fist fight again.
mm,
And what the policemen just did is they said, okay, enough. They took down the statement of the wife, and then they went to the house and then took the firearms, until he can prove differently.
Yes.
So how lawful that was, I don't know, but that is what happened. If you're aggressive and you're pointing firearms and the case has been made, they'll take away those firearms, and then yeah, you're going to have to prove it or prove the point differently. And that's going to have legal implications. That's going to have costs involved.
Look, things are going bad when you draw a firearm on your wife.
I know that my wife wants to draw a firearm on me, but
yeah. Well, if you carry a firearm on a daily basis, it's not only a tactical decision. It's also, I think, a moral one. How should responsible citizens reconcile the commitment to preserve life with the possibility, because remember, we are law-abiding citizens at the end of the day. How do you reconcile that with the possibility that you may actually one day have to take it? That's a big thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people battle with this. Look, it's like you said, I think the goal is still not to take the life once you get a firearm. The goal is to stop unlawful or imminent violence. I tend to believe that, if someone must use lethal force, it's not because they value life less, if that makes sense. It's because they value innocent life more. If that makes sense, I'm protecting what's going to lose, or the person is going to lose their life. I want to tend to protect that. So I tend to believe that 80% out there, even more, law-abiding citizens is there just to protect their family, and should an innocent bystander be threatened or with their life,
so don't go looking for trouble, because you're accountable. You're accountable for every round, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, but taking a life it's not easy, and I tend to want to disagree with the guys, because I see a lot of social media, and I tend not to get involved with it, but they all about, they'll take my gun, and I'll fight to the bitter end. Would you really, being a law-abiding citizen, would you really do that? So I get it. It's emotional. It's emotional statement at that point, but yeah, everybody says they'll take a life until they have to. There's consequences involved.
I've been asking that question a lot lately. Is it possible that you can prepare someone for the potential or the possibility of actually taking a human life? I mean, this is deep, but do you think it's possible? I don't think it's possible, because everybody handles this stuff differently. People think differently. People are wired differently. I think you can just get your training up to scratch. So you can act accordingly, to the level of your training. If ever a crisis should arise that basically forces you into such a situation, I don't think you can mentally prepare for that possibility too much.
I tend to agree with you. I think if there's a stronger emotion involved, like they're hurting your family, they're hurting your wife, your son, your daughter.
Yes.
I think then somebody will take a life to defend their loved one.
Yes.
But being prepared to, or being trained to be a killer, that's a higher level.
That's movie stuff. You don't train to be.
But it's not what we want it for.
No,
it's basically not what we want it for. We want our weapons to have fun, on a Saturday, shoot some paper targets. And then also, if the time comes and we really need to defend our loved ones and all our life, it is South Africa, then the option is there.
Yeah. So if you get into a situation where the aggression is escalating, but there isn't a weapon visible,
yeah,
what factors do you think someone should use to evaluate to make that distinction between a volatile confrontation and an attack that is truly imminent or in process and threatening your life? How do you go about making that evaluation?
I normally, I normally look at the body language, signs. Normally, I pick that up because it comes out of experience as well. I'm not saying the average guy is going to pick that up, but in the police and in my dealings with martial arts, I tend to pick that up over the years. So, but if you look at the body languages, sudden silence, the guy's talking and he's aggressive, and all of a sudden he stops talking. He's preparing to hit you, or he's preparing to pull out something like a knife or a firearm. You get that 1,000-yard stare.
You're talking about what we refer to as the pre-attack indicators now.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You get that 1,000-yard stare. The guy looks straight through you. That's warning signs. That's signs to move your body or get just out of there. Jaw clenching, fist clenching, a sudden drop in his shoulders as well. That's preparing for an attack. A weight shift when he drops to one side, maybe reaching for a firearm, maybe reaching for a knife, trying to hit you, and interview questions, what are you looking at? Stuff like that. And when you respond, he tends to attack. And then the reasons, and what I also tend to look at, and specifically for weapons, and if this interview is when do I draw my weapon, is always watch the hands. Your CPOs, your close protection officers, bodyguards for short. They interview the crowd, or they watch the crowd, not interview the crowd. They watch the crowd. They're not watching the face. They're watching the hands the whole time. The hands need to come into play for the firearm to react, or the knife, so they watch the hands the whole time. So that's a good indication for you. If I see something is fiddling, or and you verbal escalate that, keep away your hands from your trousers, and he's going on with that, that's sort of a warning sign that something's going to go down. So I would prepare for that.
So if you now prepare for that, what are things that you're trying to keep in mind, like distance and escape options?
Correct. Yeah. I want to have an escape route. The last thing that I want to do is draw my weapon. The last thing that I want to do. But in some cases, you're going to have to, if there's no other option, Riaan, you're going to have to draw that firearm. But yeah, for that pre-indications, tend to get a escape route, a way out, a way around it. Always keep verbal communication with the guy. This is not necessary. Try to keep and calm him down for that violent act not to occur.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. De-escalation, and that's a bit of a skill, and it's not necessarily an easy skill if you're in the heat of the moment to de-escalate, because you're also getting revved up, So it actually is a skill. I know there are guys who actually do training classes on just this thing, de-escalation, which I think is a brilliant skill to add to your toolbox. You never know. I mean, it can be at the family braai that you might need your de-escalation skills. You just never know. So take it one step further. What are the common scenarios where emotions convince somebody that they are justified in drawing, but legally and morally they are standing on, shaky ground.
Yeah, Rian, even me, when somebody disrespects you, you tend to want to just bring out the aggression and, put this guy in his place. But, we can't go out and shoot everybody and draw your firearm and intimidate everybody. So the normal thing is when not to draw a firearm is when there's a verbal argument, and I know this takes lots of discipline to walk away and to shut your mouth and walk
Yes.
away and, let that guy just have his moment. And then every time you need to turn the other cheek, it's difficult, but yeah, it's like that de-escalation thing,
What
it's a
about
very difficult thing.
what about property crimes if there's no real
Yeah.
threat to your life?
Yeah, I've heard a couple of stories on that where the guy steals a TV and the farmer, opens up a couple of shots and he shoots at the guy. But you can't, property theft, you can't. Defending the life of right of life has more value than the property that the guy is stealing.
Then, of course,
Even if
sorry,
sorry,
of course, a favorite is road rage.
yeah,
And being angry. I mean, the two goes hand in hand. Road rage means you've gone past just being angry.
correct.
That's
But
it.
there's horrific stuff that's happened with road rage. I've heard of a lot of people, getting into a fist fight just because of road rage. And there's even been shootings.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the thing not to do. So yeah, even minor pushing and shoving. Getting into a guy's face or he gets into your face. That minor pushing and shoving. Is that worth shooting a guy? Is your life in danger? You're gonna have to walk away in South Africa, and it's hard. Even if I take myself, I tend to want to get into the guy's face and tell him, yeah, you keep quiet, but yeah, you can't. You're gonna have to keep a level head,
No,
these days.
you have to. I mean, especially if you've got a firearm strapped to you, it's just better to be the bigger man and just get the hell away from there. Honestly, I mean, it gets difficult, and yeah, you probably need an attorney to start talking about the legalities of this. But if you driving away and this other guy is so angry that he keeps following you and he bumps your car and he pushes you off the road, it becomes a bit of a gray area in that respect. And I think you really need to keep your wits together with that. You preferably don't want to exit your vehicle and charge the guy down with a drawn firearm. You have to think about these things. Last but not least, because we can have a day-long conversation just about that point, because road rage is so prevalent in South Africa. I suppose
And the
not only,
guys,
but it's
and the
prevalent.
guys in road rage. That's actually a good interview question. But what I've heard is that there's weapons in the car. The guys carry weapons in the car. But yeah, so
Fine
another
line.
subject for another day.
You can hear the ice cracking. Finally, for this podcast, if you had to describe the defining threshold of the line where drawing becomes the only responsible option, what would you say that moment looks like in real world terms, in a practical situation?
Okay. So there's no other option. I have to draw my firearm. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? When retreat is no longer a safe option or possibility, I can't retreat out of that situation. Verbal communication has failed, or is clearly irrelevant. Lesser force or the lesser force option would be ineffective. because the guys or the attacker has already made up his mind he's going to attack. So de-escalating that situation is null and void. And the behavior of the aggressor is showing me that, you know, I'm going to get seriously damaged or even lose my life.
So basically, when you
Then-
run out of other choices,
Correct.
when your life is actively being threatened and it's happening now,
Yes.
and you've run out of choices, that's your
Yeah.
that's your final option. Okay, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me.
You know, the other thing is also, Riaan, is I've always told the students, you know, just don't be there. And then it's sort of, what do you mean, just don't be there? You know, don't be at a nightclub at past a certain point, you know, or time. You know, don't be there. You know, don't be in a dark alley. You know, stuff like that. You know, something is going to happen. You know, don't be there. You know, we know where the danger points are, but we tend to go because it's your right. You have to be there, or you can be there. Now you have to be there. You know, use your brain.
That's actually a question, and I'll never forget this. Dion got this question from somebody. This is years ago. What do I do if I walk down this dark alley and 3 guys jump me? And Dion's reply to that was, "What the F are you doing in the dark alley?" And I mean, that's
it's 3 o'clock in the morning. What?
Yeah, that's a sensible question. What are you doing there?
Yeah.
And that to me is part of situational awareness. Realize, you think about this and, like, you know, okay, maybe this isn't the best option to walk back to my car. It's too dark, whatever. Maybe I'll go this. Maybe I'll drive around the block if I see that there's a car behind me when I approach my yard. Stupid things like this. And there's always a choir that goes up and says, but we don't have to live like this. Of course we don't have to live like this. Nobody wants to bloody live like this. But here we are. And this is what we deal with. So
yeah, we are living like this.
Yeah, we are living like this. And now we have to deal with it. What else are you going to do? You have to deal with it. Anyway, Shalto, I'm gonna end it there. I'm just going to say to the viewers, carrying a firearm isn't about power, because I think that happens, and that's wrong. Not if you're a law-abiding citizen, it shouldn't be. It's about responsibility. It's about knowing the law. It's about training your mindset. It's about training. And it's about understanding the line before you ever have to cross it. If you like the video, please click on the like button. Please subscribe to the channel. Help us grow so that we can reach more and more people. And as always, smash that bell icon so you can get notifications of all the new videos coming out. If you're interested in any of the training of it, Fortis, Loan Operator, there is always a link in the description below the video. Check it out. We look forward to seeing you on a range one of these days. Shalto is looking forward to seeing you on a range one of these days.
Absolutely.
To be precise.
Absolutely.
Shalto, thank you so much for your time. Highly appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure, Riaan. Thank you for having me.